What do Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Peppa Pig, and Blue's Clues have in common? It's not just that they are children's animation shows, or simply personified animals. It's not even the impact they had on Gen Z childhoods. It's that they all feel lonely. Chapter 1: The Lonely Universes of Children's Animation. To escape the terrors of adulthood, Gen Z is turning to nostalgia more than ever before. This can look like romanticizing scholastic book fairs, logging back into Webkins with a password you probably still use at work, and for most of us, it also looks like revisiting the shows we grew up watching. Watching old favorites feels different now, but it goes beyond our developed frontal lobes and zapped attention spans. Watching old shows now seems to fill us with even more dread than what we're trying to escape. During our own nostalgic rewatching, we have noticed some shows from our childhood feel lonelier than others. What is it that makes animation feel so lonely? For us to consider a show lonely, it had to meet one or more of the following criteria: low-quality rendering, unspecified setting, and limited world building. Low-quality rendering includes violations such as rolling hills, deep blue skies, flat colors, and reused animation models for background characters, buildings, and foliage. Unspecified setting means that the setting doesn't inform the plot. Our brains are wired against the unknown, so it's unsettling when there's no named city or town to ground us in. Where are we? What year is it? What universe even is this? Even in the case of Peppa Pig, which technically takes place in Peppa Town, which is allegedly near London, sometimes the name isn't enough. It takes more than just a welcome sign to feel grounded. It takes community. This is where limited world building contributes to loneliness. When a show lacks world building, there's a foreboding emptiness. Nobody around for miles. Existence only in the vacuum of a child's mind. Without established buildings, background characters that you know and love, or an understood culture within the universe, the world feels flat. To feel comforted by a show, it must have a community that lives and breathes even when we're not looking. If a setting exists only for the viewers, it feels lonely. Examples. For the purpose of brevity, it's important to note that we are focusing on the shows from our childhoods, airing from around 1998 to 2010. There are some exceptions based on popularity, and the wildcard shows our parents made us watch, but this list will mainly resonate with Gen Z. The shows that include one or more of our loneliness criteria are Blue's Clues, Thomas the Train, Miss Sunny's Spider Patch, Back at the Barnyard, JoJo's Circus, JJ the Jet Plane, Roly Poly Oly, Handy Manny, Bob the Builder, VeggieTales, Sid the Science Kid, Higglyhound Heroes, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Wow Wow Wubsy, and Peppa Pig. Non-examples. In order to better understand what we mean, here's a list of animated children's shows that don't give us this empty feeling. Chowder, Gravity Falls, Arthur, Lilo and Stitch, Nihao Kailan, Wonder Pets, Ben 10, 16, Bubble Guppies, Proud Family, Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, Wild Kratts, Maya and Miguel, Adventure Time, Danny Phantom, Cyber Chase, Fairly Odd Parents, Franklin, Berenstain Bears, Fetch with Ruff Ruffman, Little Einsteins, Little Bear, Phineas and Ferb, Martha Speaks, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Curious George, and Max and Ruby. Exceptions. There are also some exceptions to this rule, wherein a show might violate one of the three criteria but not generate the same isolated feeling. They fit the definition but are not lonely. In the case of shows like Total Drama Island, Backyardigans, and Courage the Cowardly Dog, their isolation is intentional. Sometimes we just need to be in the middle of nowhere. These shows break the rule of established world building because its world doesn't really need building. We're on a remote island for the plot. We're transporting to imaginary worlds for the plot. We're in a horrifying, nearly apocalyptic hellscape for the plot. Low-quality rendering also feels safe when the original source material is a book. Shows like Charlie Brown, Caillou, and Charlie and Lola are allowed to look empty because they sprouted from the blank pages of a book. The book motifs are included in the show, sometimes transitioning from a book into the animation. Additionally, a show can get away with poor rendering if they make up for it in consistent and robust communities and tight storylines, such as in SpongeBob SquarePants and Regular Show. Not every exception can be explained, but maybe you can help explain why the following shows feel like exceptions to our rules. SpongeBob, Caillou, Winnie the Pooh, 3-2-1 Penguins, Little Bill, Backyardigans, Oswald, Dora the Explorer, Maggie and the Ferocious Beast, Regular Show, Flapjack, Charlie Brown, Tom and Jerry, Charlie and Lola, Samurai Jack, Jimmy Neutron, Dragon Tales, Total Drama Island, and Courage the Cowardly Dog. You tell us, do any of these actually belong in the lonely category? Do you think that they're lonely despite their concepts and our justifications? Do you even know what we're talking about? Non-animated shows that feel lonely. Despite the fact that we are focused on animated shows in this video, there are some exceptionally lonely and arguably straight up creepy non-animated shows we need to mention. Our picks for lonely non-animated shows are Mr. Meaty, Pee-wee's Playhouse, Bear in the Big Blue House, Barney, The Upside Down Show, Booba, Teletubbies, Wishbone, Lazy Town, and High Five. What is it that makes real life feel lonely? In the case of Teletubbies, Booba, and Barney, it's easy to blame the puppets, but Sesame Street and the Muppets have never betrayed our sense of ease quite like these guys do. All 10 shows are grounded in real life and were recorded live, but something is off. Something is surreal. For example, what is a Teletubby? What went into the decision to film Booba on a soundstage? Why is a literal dinosaur the preschool teacher? Why is Pee-wee playing in this house? Why is no one questioning these absurdities? What makes the real world feel so unreal? We pondered this and have landed on one common thread: the use of manufactured backdrops. To put it simply, they're still not real. Liminal spaces. If you're still with us, we'd like to dive into the why. Well, there's a reason a passing photo of a yellow wallpapered office space and white tiled basement pools sends a confusing chill down your spine. There's a reason every internet-obsessed Gen Z and millennial rush to watch Backrooms. Liminal spaces. Liminal spaces can be defined as, quote, the time between the what was and the next. It is a place of transition, waiting and not knowing. Liminal space is where all transformation takes place, if we learn to wait and let it form us. Close quote. When analyzing why liminal spaces are creepy, journalist Tom Hale credits, quote, stretching corridors, eerily lit rooms, and unsettlingly open spaces, close quote. Instead of the classic windowless hallways and abandoned office buildings, children's shows bring the liminal feeling outside. These shows include the low-quality rendering, unspecified setting, and limited world building we're talking about. Even though the origin of liminal spaces can be credited to this 2019 4chan post, our generation has been onto something as early as our working memory. Before we could read, we knew something was off about the shows we watched every day. The legend of liminal spaces and the backrooms was an idea that simply didn't have chair legs to stand on until we were old enough to make sense of how foreboding some of our favorite TV shows really were. We had to age in order to paint a face on nostalgia. Nostalgia is the driving force for the liminal spaces craze. In the same way, it's also the main reason we revisit things from our childhood. So why wouldn't liminal spaces have some connection to our past? Liminal spaces can't be unstitched from nostalgia. Madeline Zhao wrote for The New Yorker, quote, liminal spaces are in-between places that exist as a means to an end, to be traveled through but not lingered in. Stairwells, roads, corridors, hotels, close quote. She emphasizes that liminal spaces aren't meant to be lingered in, but when we watch shows filled with liminal spaces, is it really that surprising that we feel unsettled by the end of an episode? When we watch, we technically live in the place we aren't meant to stay. Zhao goes on to say, quote, liminal spaces owe much of their appeal to their framing and lack of human presence, close quote. At the risk of sounding like Dora the Explorer, what is the simpler way to say lack of human presence? That's right, loneliness. Journalist Tom Hale also emphasizes the same point of loneliness, being that, quote, none of the images feature any people or living beings, close quote. The feeling of loneliness in animated shows can be tied to the same one liminal spaces provide. These shows feel this way because they quite literally take place in liminal spaces. Some of these shows drop us right off in a literal uncanny valley. Chapter 3: Exploring More Variables. You can't really quantify a liminal space, so we identified other variables that might help explain this phenomenon. Using the 25 shows we've mentioned so far, including the non-animated ones, we recorded their setting, release year, network, and age group, and created spreadsheets and pie charts to look for any patterns. Here's what we found. Variable 1, setting. Since unspecified settings is one of our criteria for lonely animation, we attempted to specify them. We might not know exactly where Sid experiments with science, or which town JoJo's circus performs, but we have a general idea based on their archetype. We labeled the shows as taking place in either the city, a suburb, a rural town, or, in the case of Booba, no setting at all. The data shows that more than half of the Uncanny Valley shows take place in rural areas. This makes sense, as Merriam-Webster defines rural as, quote, open lands, small towns, and farms with low numbers of people, close quote. This aligns with the definition of liminal spaces. Like water is wet, rural settings feel lonesome. As two girls who grew up surrounded by cornfields and hay bales, it's hard to point a finger at the wide open spaces. There certainly is a need for rural towns, and they don't feel quite as liminal in real life, but the animation from our childhood doesn't quite nail the textures and dimension of real rolling hills and tree lines. To put it bluntly, we're scared of animated trees and hills, but can we fully blame the rural setting? Variable 2, release year. Given the obvious discrepancies in animation quality as the years go by, it's reasonable to assume release year may correlate to low rendering quality. The picture difference between Toy Story 1 and 5 demonstrates this well. 31 years of technological advancements, and the difference is clear. Like putting glasses on for the first time, the leaves have texture. The trees no longer look like a bundle of grapes. You can make out one shingle from the next. Life finally looks real. Toy Story 1 is guilty of breaking our first criteria, low rendering quality, but by the fifth movie, all the uncanniness has stripped away in favor of true realism. How much of this can be credited simply to the release year? We predicted that most of the guilty TV shows would have been released before the year 2010, so it didn't come as a shock that most of them came out from 2000 to 2009. Of course, this could be explained by the sampling bias of two girls who are old enough to have celebrated the release of High School Musical 2, but what traits defined animation from the early 2000s? If you answered 3D animation, you'd be correct. Of the 15 guilty animated shows, 12 used 3D animation as opposed to 2D. This makes sense because the success of Toy Story 1, released in 1995 as the first feature-length 3D animated movie, sparked a boom in 3D movies and TV shows in subsequent years. Clearly, we aren't as offended by 2D animated shows. Even the very first animated feature-length movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which came out in 1937, doesn't feel lonely, partly due to the lush detail of its hand-painted backgrounds. The empty, dull backgrounds of 3D animation, which were all the rage in the 2000s, can explain the lonely feeling we've been talking about. But what is it that makes 3D animation so egregious?
There's a reason that it took until 1995 for a 3D animated feature to be released, despite the basic technology and process of 3D animation predating Toy Story's release by decades. Money. And time. But as we know, time is also money. In the time between the first animated short film, A Computer Animated Hand, in 1972, to the boom of 3D animated features in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were countless 3D animated short films being produced, many by Pixar, that were likely serving as experimentation and development of the software and techniques for 3D animating and rendering. But it wasn't until Pixar's partnership with the Walt Disney Company that they were able to fund the creation of a full-length movie. Rendering more equals spending more. Rendering requires expensive technology and people working in various roles that require specific education and expertise to work with the technology. It's one thing to fund and produce a 90-minute feature using 3D animation. However, it's a different situation entirely when you're developing an entire season of television through this medium. While I imagine the talent and capability was there for higher quality graphics and more evolved world building in the animated television shows at the time, the reality is that each production had a budget to keep and deadlines to stick to, which at the time heavily restricted and impacted the level of detail they were able to deliver. With this in mind, it makes sense that more profitable production companies or networks would have the resources to produce either a higher quantity of 3D animated shows or better quality 3D animated shows. Obviously, not every show that we've marked guilty actually utilizes 3D animation. However, it could be claimed that there are similar corners being cut in the details of 2D animated or live-action projects in our list. Our idea was that the lesser-funded projects or networks would have a higher concentration of guilty shows. However, the data is more ambiguous than we'd expected. Though as predicted, PBS, a publicly funded network, did have a significant contribution to the guilty parties. Variable 4, age group. At a certain point of our collective ponder about the reasons these shows appear lonely, the question had to be asked, did they do this on purpose? Luckily, both of our day jobs incorporate foundational principles of early childhood education, so we already had suspicions about the possible intentionality of the less stimulating settings that many of the shows exist within. To test this idea, we sorted the shows by age and developmental demographics that the shows target: toddler, ages 2 to 3, preschool, 4 to 6, school age, 7 to 11, and adolescent, 12 to 18. After running the numbers, nearly 65% of the Guilty shows were aimed at the preschool developmental stage, and most shows aimed at this demographic, at least during the 2000s, were designed to be highly educational programming. This finding sparked an additional hypothesis for me. It seems that there's a certain multi-axis graph or spectrum that many of these shows fit into. On one end of the spectrum is education, and the other is entertainment or artistic expression of some kind. The basic trend being that the more educational a show is trying to be, the less resources it will utilize to stylize or build out the world of the show. All of this to say, maybe it wasn't the goal of every 2000 show to create the most entertaining, artistically expressive, or visually stunning project. Maybe they wanted to use their talent and resources to aid in the education of society's youngest and most impressionable. Maybe we're way too old to be critiquing the artistic integrity of shows made for preschoolers.
Chapter 4: Honorable Mentions. Before this investigation comes to a close, it only feels right to mention the movies that made the list as guilty parties, since these movies were influential both to us as viewers in the past, but also influential to the animation/film industry in general. Coraline, Over the Hedge, Shark Tale, Toy Story 1, Monster House, Wallace and Gromit, Hoodwinked, A Bug's Life, Rankin Bass Christmas Movies, Cat in the Hat, Zathura, Wizard of Oz, Shark Boy and Lava Girl, Spy Kids, and Milo and Otis. For many of the same reasons, these movies evoke an unsettling feeling when you watch them. Please let me know if you agree or disagree or have anything to add to the list.
Chapter 5: Conclusion. This video started as a simple shared document in July of 2022, years before we had ever considered making an actual channel. In this document, we offhandedly described this phenomena as, quote, shows that are unsettling because they evoke loneliness. The setting is often isolated in the middle of a desolate nowhere and often surrounded by green rolling hills that never seem to end, close quote. After revisiting the concept, it seems like we were kinda on the money with our description. Looking at our very scientifically sound data, it appears that it is not one variable or symptom that causes this occurrence. It's a synthesis or amalgamation of demographics, release year, network, style, physical setting, and their related limitations that combine in perfect alchemy to create a product that is truly bizarre.
So, when we say that we've been saying this, we truly have been saying this.